Okay, I wanted to share a quick some thoughts I was thinking that are very clear to me about the pandemic and in hindsight, just to clarify how, put my thoughts out there, see if this speaks to anyone. The idea of being censored for misinformation brings up the question of, well, who does the who decides what misinformation is, right? And there's a level of understanding when you're in a crisis situation. You don't want the wrong information getting out. Well, now Biden, right, has officially declared that we're not in a crisis anymore, even though we probably were not for a very long time. But so we're not in a crisis anymore. So let's go examine all of the misinformation, and see if it's misinformation. If the data is incorrect, that's one thing. If the data is showing something that is not helpful to the agenda and the narrative that was being pushed, which was originally that, if you get vaccinated, you can't spread the virus. You can't get the virus. Turns out you could spread the virus. You could get the virus. I'm just saying all these things because, after the Navy SEALs do a mission, they do an after action report. It's like, what did we do wrong? Because it's, I don't know, some scary stuff. Like Bill Gates, they're like, the next one's going to be really bad. And I don't know, being that they predicted this one almost with Fauci said that Trump was going to have a pandemic during his, while he's president. And the fact that they did a coronavirus pandemic simulation called Event 201 in October of 2019, it makes me a little sketched out when they say that the next one is going to be really bad, being that they kind of predicted this one, and it may very possibly have come from a lab in Wuhan that Anthony Fauci and the United States was funding to do research on coronaviruses. So if it happens again, and we haven't really kind of had the discussion as a society, what's to say that's not the end? It's like everyone gets a barcode. We came out of this a lot closer to a tyrannical state than I think anybody could have imagined. Or then, actually that's definitely not true. A lot of people could have imagined that, but a lot of people didn't. A lot of people would not have believed that if you told them, because it was told to them by a lot of people, and it was not believed by a lot of people. So, the idea that they would be doing contact tracing and have apps for that, and be firing nurses for not getting a vaccine, all sorts of workers for not getting a vaccine that skipped FDA approval, or I'm sorry, that it, skipped like the normal process of trials, safety trials, and doctors who had hesitancy and concerns were coming out, and they would get banned from the internet, and possibly even having their licenses stripped for spreading misinformation, things like that. I'm not saying that I'm an expert on any information. I'm not. I'm just bringing up the ideas of the entire situation. And so yeah, there's a lot of places I could go with that. I think it's important to have the discussion. We came a lot closer with one one virus to tyranny that I think anyone could have thought. You know, if another one comes out, I'm like, we're pretty much doomed. You know, it's like everyone's gonna have a barcode. You can't leave your house. You can't, you know, government subsidized food. I mean, government, you know, gives you permission to live or die. You know, that seems like far-fetched. I could imagine that being almost the case, especially given that we did the lockdowns. The lockdowns have been shown not to prevent the spread. The lockdowns basically destroyed the economy. We're about to go into a massive depression. I mean, it was like a fast track to destruction. And the fact that the World Economic Forum gained a bunch more power, and Bill Gates, you know, no one like elected Bill Gates, but all of a sudden everyone's listening to him. You know, I don't know who trusts Bill Gates, but Bill Gates was like a cutthroat businessman, you know, turned philanthropist. A lot of countries have not really been happy with him coming and doing the philanthropy that he's doing. They think he has alternative intentions. But for the leader of the World Economic Forum, and Bill Gates is the largest private funding, Bill Gates Foundation, it's always done through a foundation. You know, if you want to do under the table type things, you could do it through a foundation. It seems like it's done like that, the Clinton Foundation, etc. But Bill Gates is the largest private funder of the World Economic Forum. No one's elected the World Economic Forum. It's a private group. And the fact that the leader of that, Klaus Schwab, wrote a book called The Great Reset, and that they're trying to do a Great Reset. I mean, it's all very out in the open and also extremely suspicious. But I was just thinking, I just want to have said all these things. You know, misinformation, it's a... You know, so I'm sure information, you know, you could have information that proves to be, I mean, what is there? There's data, you know, you could have, if you have data, someone can make a certain conclusion that, you know, a hypothesis, let's say that they call that information, then you test the hypothesis, it turns out to be not true. So maybe that would be proven to be misinformation. Or you have straight up lies. All of these things, let's say you do a study and it's a flawed study and you come up with the wrong conclusion, maybe that's misinformation, you know. But the best way to go about flushing out misinformation is open dialogue. That's always been the best way, you know. Otherwise, it's like, you know, what do you go to a court, and you argue the whole case in front of a jury or a judge or both. Sometimes there's no jury, is why I'm saying that. And you go over everything, and then you get closer to the truth. You know, usually, I mean, that's the intention, and you're probably much closer to the truth. A bunch of information probably came up. Even if, let's say, you thought the person was guilty, they end up being guilty. Probably a bunch of information came up that you weren't aware of in the defense of the person, etc. So it brings everything to the surface, lets it all get flushed out, and then lets the truth survive and lets everything else die. You know, and now, especially since we're done with the end of the crisis, you know, if you're in the middle of a crisis and somebody's saying go left, somebody's saying go right, I can understand why you might want to be more sensory, you know, more prone to censor, because people will just do whatever they're told in that moment. It's kind of like the military or something. It's like when you're in a crisis, people will just do. It's like go left, do this, do that. People will just do that. You know, they've done not done study. They have case studies of where somebody who was not qualified would just go into a crisis situation and start telling people to do things, and everyone just does it because we're kind of programmed like that. You know, I can understand that, but now we're not in a crisis anymore, and so why is the information still being censored? You know, that's what I'm wondering. Why isn't it coming out now to be talked about and being encouraged to be talked about? I think it's pretty clear that people don't. There's an agenda. You know, believe it or not, money pretty much makes the world go round. This is what I was But I shouldn't say it like that. I should ask questions to lead to my reasoning for thinking that. And so I'll do that. So let's say, okay, misinformation is censored. Okay, what does that mean? So YouTube, Facebook, etc., the big tech companies have, a very small number of people who make the decisions at the top. Maybe even Mark Zuckerberg for all of Meta. Maybe it's him. Maybe it's more than him. I'm not sure, but a small amount of people, right? So who communicates, hey, this is misinformation, this is real information? That's a great question, right? Do I know 100%? No, I don't know. But is it like all of the scientists, democratically elect who they think is the most respectable and honest scientist or group of scientists, and then that's a council, and then those people communicate with Mark Zuckerberg, etc.? No, that's not what happens. Unless I'm delusional, that's not what happens. Do I know exactly what happens? No, but I would imagine it's the most influential and the most powerful scientists or group of scientists or gang of scientists who communicate, hey, this is information, this is misinformation, etc. Or maybe it's not them. Maybe it's who tells them what to do, right? I don't know the answers to all that, but if you think that, it's the most trustworthy, honorable, straight, upright people who are communicating with them, you have to look at who gets into what position and like how. Is that really how that game works? I don't think it is. I think is Fauci the best? And let me put it this way: the inventor of the PCR test, which PCR is what they stick up, they stick the swab up your nose to test for your COVID, to test if you're COVID positive. The inventor of the PCR test said Fauci, he's like politicians like Fauci and the rest of them. You could type it in. Peter Kulis, I think. Kunis, I forgot his last name. The inventor of the PCR test on Fauci. He's like, Fauci and the rest of them will look directly in the camera and lie to the American people's face. He's like, and the sheep, meaning everyone who just believes what they see on TV, he's like, the sheep will believe it. And it's so hard for me to look around and see all of the sheep because I don't know the answers. I'm not proclaiming to know the answers. What I'm saying is that it hurts my heart to see how dumbed down people have gotten. It's like, hey, this is what the truth is, People will be like, this is what the truth is. There's no discussion about it. People are like, okay. That psychology is going to lead us to terrible places. That's like Hitler says, go left, and you go left, It's like Fauci said this. That guy was like, dude, Fauci, it basically is a total crook liar, and he's like, the dumb people will believe whatever he says. And I look around, and a lot of people are doing exactly that. Now, that guy died right before the pandemic. But I'll give another example. I'm sorry. Why am I blanking on his name? The inventor of the mRNA vaccine. I can't believe I'm blanking on his name right now. But very soft-spoken guy, highly intelligent, obviously. He's like, yeah, this is basically... He's been banned from YouTube. This is my point. It's like if Einstein is banned from YouTube for talking about, the theory of relativity, it's like, what the hell's going on? Like, who is not banned, He was, why am I blanking on his name? I wish I remembered his name right now. That's all right. Robert Malone. That's it. Robert Malone. Dr. Robert Malone. I believe is being banned in a lot of places because he's like, what is going on is... He's speaking out against the agenda that's being pushed and what determines information versus misinformation. And I would argue that it may very well be, believe it or not, money, you know, like how do you get to the top and stay at the top? Fauci, for instance, Fauci's an unelected head of the NAID and the whatever else it is, you know, NIH, NAID, very powerful, right? Everyone's looking to him to tell them what to do, right? And a lot of the shit that they said was just wrong. You know, it's like, if you get the vaccine, you can't get COVID. Okay, you can. Okay, but you can't spread it. Okay, you can spread it. What Dr. Robert Malone was saying was that it actually puts it puts a pressure on the virus to mutate. People who get vaccinated and then get COVID get a mild form of it. And it's like, basically, he had a 2-hour interview and it was censored from YouTube, you know? I don't really know where you could find that now. Probably BitChute or something, or Rumble maybe. Dr. Robert Malone, 2-hour interview with another leading virologist. And they were basically saying that the vaccines are causing the virus to mutate at a faster rate because like people who've been vaccinated and then catch COVID, like natural immunity will wipe all of COVID out, basically. It'll keep it at bay, but if you've been vaccinated and then you catch COVID, there's, you know, I'm gonna butcher this, but it's something along the lines of there's areas where it can, like, it pushes it to mutate because they're not as comprehensively covered. It's kind of like an incomplete course of antibiotics. You know, that causes that bacteria to become stronger because it doesn't quite kill it. Well, the mRNA vaccine that was being given to people, you know, the vaccines, doesn't quite block it, doesn't quite suppress it, so it causes it to mutate. That's what they were saying. Well, that's labeled misinformation and removed from YouTube. So it's like, well, who said to do that, you know? And what I'm saying is it possible that people who benefit massively from the vaccines being sold, like Fauci, they won't declare whether they benefit from, you know, the people making public health decisions like Fauci. And Rand Paul called Fauci out. He's like, are you basically making money from the vaccines? And he pretty much wouldn't answer. And it's kind of crazy, you know, it's like you're in charge of, you're like, yeah, everyone needs to get the vaccine, and then everyone gets the vaccine and you get paid for that. That's crazy, you know. That should not be like that, obviously, and that's why he was getting called out, but he wouldn't answer those questions. But you know, I'm basically saying what determines information versus misinformation. Is it possible that it's about money, you know? And it's like, yeah, it's very possible, you know. What determines who's speaking with, like, there wasn't even enough time to figure out what's information versus misinformation. So how could somebody possibly know? That's the whole point of communicating, to figure out what's real and what's not. And now that we're out of a crisis, people are not having the discussion still, you know? And so then what happens the next time? Like Bill Gates is saying, it's scary that they say, like, the next one's going to be really bad, with a smile on his face. Okay, that's scary to me, you know? What's going to happen that next time, you know? I'm not saying I know anything about the future. I'm just saying there's some weird stuff going on. You know, Fauci was like, Trump will have a pandemic during his presidency. And they did something called Event 201. It's all over the internet. You can just look it up. It's not a conspiracy theory or anything. It's just unfortunate that, like, discussion, it'd be like if you're like, hey, Hitler, you know, like, maybe the Jews are not so bad. He's like, dude, you're a conspiracy theorist, you know, like, you need to stop listening to those crazy American conspiracy theorists who think that we shouldn't put the Jews in concentration camps. It's like, whenever you call one side of a discussion a name that people are afraid of, and definitely, you know, you could go way off and start thinking, you could go way off onto that. But that's the whole point of discussion. That way you could be like, okay, let's have the discussion. And you hear something you're like, that sounds a little bit like, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. So, okay, great. You know, maybe that's not true. But if doctors are coming out with information like, hey, my patients are getting sick in these ways, here's the ways that we're finding, ivermectin's working for my patients really well, hydroxychloroquine, these things are working for my patients, etc. If you censor that, that's like, that's a little weird. That's what I was thinking of too. Let's say you're looking at like, your spouse's phone or something, or like they say, hey, could you look at my phone? They give you permission, and then they're like, oh, wait, hey, give it back. Don't look at that part. That's censored for your benefit. How would that make you feel? Would you be like, thank you for censoring that information? You'd probably be like, okay, what the fuck was that? What was that? Because now you want to know, right? Do you think that moment, and I'm not saying, let's say it was, maybe that's a bad example because maybe you want to trust your spouse. Maybe it was nothing, and you look and it was nothing. That's great. It means you have trust. Wonderful. But let's say it was, an ingredient in a box or something in food. Oh, what's this ingredient? That ingredient is censored for your benefit. When doctors are coming out sharing results and problems they've had with the vaccine or things like that, and that's censored for misinformation, you have to wonder, okay, I appreciate you censoring it. I'm going to take it with a grain of salt. But with that being said, can I see it? No, you cannot see it. It's like, okay, so this is getting a little weird. You know what I mean? Yeah, I guess that's pretty much my point. Things I've talked about. And, I don't want to see people being led blindly and dumbly, deaf, dumb, and blind to the slaughter. Believe it or not, the instincts to have power and control and dominate over fellow mankind that, were in Hitler, that were in Stalin, that were in, all sorts of government atrocities, those didn't die out of the human being in the last 100 years. Those have not been wiped off the face of the earth. They've merely mutated, And the way that they've mutated, in my opinion, is that they come under the guise of doing something good, and then while everyone is like, oh, thank you for doing something good, you're able to do something bad, like the Bill Gates Foundation. I don't know, in my opinion, I don't know if they're up to all that much good, you know what I mean? They fund news organizations. Russell Brand made a great point. It's like, these are not, news organizations are not non-profits. They are for-profits. It's like, that's called a bribe. You know what I mean? Like, oh, he funds Apple. It's like, why is anyone funding Apple? You don't need to fund a business. Businesses are funded by their customers, and in that case, they would be sponsors, right? CNN should be funded by its sponsors and by its commercial, but it's partially funded by Bill Gates, and it's like, okay, that's called a bribe. You know what I mean? Why is the Bill Gates Foundation funding a for-profit organization? It doesn't make any sense, but of course it does make sense. But when you have a nonprofit, you could do all sorts of weird, shady stuff. Fund the World Economic Forum, which is now, massively has much more power than ever before. They're trying to push through all these green things. It's like green, carbon emissions, da-da-da. If they use that as an excuse that everyone has to get tracked to figure out how much carbon they use, dude, it's not about the carbon, okay? It's about the tracking. They don't care. These are my opinion. That's my opinion. But whenever, they did the Patriot Act right after 9/11, what does it do? It takes away a lot of American citizens' rights and allows the government to spy on them. Well, that doesn't sound very good. So let's call it the Patriot Act. That's how it goes down. It's like, we want to be able to track all citizens and control whether they spend and or receive money through a digital currency and a social credit score like they have in China. That seems like that's where we're headed. That's my opinion. Biden's getting rid of the federal credit score getting rid of the 3 credit reporting agencies, or attempting to, in order to make way for a federal credit score. If they combine that federal credit score with a digital currency, they can now control your life. You're on a domestic terrorist list, meaning you voted Republican or something like that, and you can no longer spend or receive money. That seems far-fetched. Maybe a couple years ago it did. Now we're very close, to that type of situation. And the sooner, I hope I'm wrong, but yeah, I think I've pretty much said what I wanted to, but beware of what, it's like the guy's trying to get into your pants, right? The guy's trying to get into the girl's pants. It's not like, but he said this. Yeah, dude, it wasn't about what he said. There's a goal, but he said he would be there for me. He said this. Yeah. Yep. Like I look around and I see a lot of suckers, it's like, no, they said it was about the climate. Yeah, definitely. I know that's what they said. Believe it or not, there are people in positions of power who didn't get there because they were the nicest, most honest people, I'm not saying that everybody in a position of power is like that, especially people who are in their way there, but there's a lot of shady ways, especially, if you're funded like by the Bill Gates Fund. If you get, if you get your power from satisfying customers, you have a great business. Okay, that's you. The marketplace elected you. It's not perfect, but it's fairly efficient. If you are a politician, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting off on a tangent, but at least you could be democratically elected or kicked out. These people, if you're elected by Bill Gates, it doesn't mean you're the greatest guy ever. It means you're the guy who can be controlled. You know what I mean? And that's how things are going down. And just be awake, be aware, because if we all close our eyes, the instincts that are inside of humans that are dark to control and, dominate mankind and have complete control, like, those are not gone. And sometimes the guys with the biggest smile on their face are the ones with the biggest instincts to dominate and control. So I hope everyone keeps their eyes open, and don't forget to think for yourself. Those are my thoughts. Okay.